Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's Veterinary Ledger. We are excited to be here today with Ryan Whitley of RWE. Well, he knows what he does better than we do, so we'll let him introduce himself.
One thing I do know is that this mustache is terrible, so I want to get out of the way. I'm going on a high school guys fishing trip, and I promise to do this. So,
Are you growing it
in
on
no
a
way,
dare?
in no way do I think it looks good. It's just there. Okay, so
You got to
I
embrace that. You just keep it, grow it up for a while.
We'll see what
Rock it.
happens. It doesn't look good, but so RWE. Thanks for having me. RWE Design Build. We've been around 27 years, building veterinary clinics, starting in the Chicagoland area. We've done over 500 of them at this point in up to 22 different states. It's pretty much all we do. 90% of what we do is animal care facilities, and it's what we love to do. So we definitely focus on the animal health community, go to the animal health shows. Initially, we were more of just a construction or a GC, and then we just started to bring the design piece inside because we felt like we were participating a heavy amount in that side anyway, so we might as well bring that inside.
I love that. So when you were a little boy growing up, did you say, man, I just want to grow up and build veterinary practices?
I think so. I don't remember the exact words that went through my head, but it was something like, right? I brought everything home, right? Same story as probably a lot of people in the animal health community, like brought home bunnies, and every time I saw a dog in a shelter or whatever, like tried to bring it home, right? So thought I was going to be a veterinarian at some point. Math and science and chemistry stopped that.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I worked in the clinic for many years as a technician, kind of grew up on the job training, and just a testament to what those folks do, DVMs. They do some things on a day-to-day basis that I just wasn't cut out to do. So I just found a way to stay within the industry. Worked in the equipment side for 15 years with a company called Midmark, which is an amazing equipment manufacturer out of Ohio that services the animal health industry, amongst others. And then found myself with RWE as the Midmark rep in Chicago. I just found myself working on a ton of animal health projects with them. And then as they were expanding, luckily found a home with them.
Very cool. So when you say design build, I mean, break it down for me. What goes into all the various stages? I'm assuming that means like from start to finish, you are working with that practice owner through every stages. What are the stages of the design build process?
Yeah, I mean, depending upon the project, that can mean a bunch of different things, right? But we obviously feel like the design process or the design build process makes it more seamless for the customer, right? A lot of the questions they'll have initially is, who does this for me? Who does that for me? Ultimately, how do I get to this, right? And then just throughout our experience, we've just found that keeping all those things under one roof, whether that's an internal employee or a partner that we're helping to manage, just makes the process a lot more smoother, hopefully more efficient, and more cost effective for the customer so that they get a better result. So if we're talking about like full life cycle of a project, right, we would come in early on, talk to people about potentially a property or a building that they're looking at, what maybe some general costs are, but just taking them through the process of all the things that go into validating whether that property is going to work for them, or if they're already committed to it, working out like, what do we need to do to put together a good plan for you? So everything from due diligence items, soil testing, looking at the building, sending in engineers to check out the existing equipment and things like that, conceptual design, right? Whether that's floor planning, site planning, using that to create budgets so that they can make an educated decision as to like, hey, is this going to work for me? Like, am I approved for this financially, right? Part of what you guys do is looking at these plans and understanding, is this a good move, right? So we try to do everything we can to make sure that they're going to be successful and that we can deliver a great product as we take them through that early conceptual, through full-on drawings, architectural, interior design, permitting, getting it out to some contractor. So ultimately we can get them a construction cost and then managing it all the way through construction until they're at their grand opening.
I love your website says from soil to ceiling. And I think that paints like such a good picture of like, oh, I get that, right? You help me every step of the way, which I think is huge because you don't know what you don't know. So is there ever the fine line that you have to come in and say like, we need to function over aesthetics? Like, is there something that like maybe practice owners aren't thinking of and they're like, oh, this looks so cute, or I love it, it's pretty, and I wanted to go here, and then you're like, that doesn't make sense. Is that your job, or do we go with the flow?
Different people, right? Different departments as we move them through handle different sides of that, right? Like internally, we've got pre-construction folks that help answer questions on the front end, cost, planning, stuff like that. And then as they go through the design process, you have architects and interior designers that are holding on to the information that we gave them from the early part of the process to help them get to the end part, hopefully with a product that they love, and also in a budget and time frame that we told them and what they're looking for, right? So all that kind of comes into play. But to answer your question, right, like we do things on the front end to make sure like we understand like, hey, what are their needs, right? And what are their priorities, right? Because sometimes you can be like, I want the best of everything. Well, your budget doesn't necessarily mean that you can have the best of everything. It'd be great if it did, but it doesn't always happen that way. So we need to prioritize things like understand the scope of the project, prioritize like aesthetics, quality, function, all those things, right? And then that can change throughout the facility, right? So like, I really want my front office to be this, or my front of house reception area to look like this. And then as we move back to the back of the house, then maybe we can change that up a little bit from a cost perspective or something like that. So we try to ask some questions early on to make sure that we prioritize what their needs are, right? And what's most important to them so that we can kind of tailor that down the road. So it's something that we're proud of and they're proud of as well.
Is there anything though, like functionality wise, that you've incorporated into a design, into a build recently that just made a lot of sense, that not just was the right result for the practice owner, but something you can see rolling out into or trying to weave into other practices that come on board with you?
Yeah, I mean, we're always trying to stay on top of current trends, like whether it's what gives them the best ROI, right? Like getting as many exam rooms in a practice as possible, right? And again, they're ultimately making all the decisions, but we're guiding them, right? Like, so we'll tend to say like, hey, more exam rooms you can have, the better you are, right? So we'll try to be as efficient as possible with those exam rooms, try to maximize their treatment areas and procedure areas, and they kind of build around that depending upon what works for them. But over time, right, the benefit of working with anybody who is specialized or industry specific is that you get the benefits of all their past successes, but also their past failures, right? So we've done a lot of these over the years in small condensed spaces, everything from like, I think the smallest one we've done is like 1,500 square feet interior build out to we've done an 85,000 square foot veterinary specialty center just north of Chicago. So wildly different projects, but unique in their own part. And then we use that experience from all these different projects to help guide the next person, right? To make recommendations and ultimately them making the decisions that they think are best.
Sure. I mean, you just said 1,500 square feet, 85,000 square feet. Is there a range? Is there a norm where like the wheelhouse for that GP is what, 2,500, 3,500 square feet? And if so, what is that quote, perfect layout that you try? Number of exam rooms, is there square footage per exam room that you're really trying to incorporate in there?
Yeah, again, like I think we're trying to maximize that space regardless of the size. The 85,000 is that is a unicorn, right? That's the biggest one we've ever done, right? I would tell you like, no, like projects that we consider to be larger projects, right? Is anything like when it gets above 10,000 square feet. Like that's a big veterinary clinic, right? Whether you're talking about a GP, an individual specialty practice, like usually when you're getting into that upper 10,000 plus, it's a larger practice, maybe a multi-specialty practice, maybe a humane society or a shelter or something like that. But either way, like it's what are we working with and how can we maximize it based on what their priorities and goals, right? And so that's where we kind of influx our experience and expertise and combine it with what their goals are. So I wouldn't say like there's what I can tell you like an average, right? Like typically your startup practices are somewhere in that 2,000 to 3,000 square footish interior build outs. And then later on in life, whether it's like their second location or another location, they start getting bigger, right? Then they start getting into like the 5,000 plus range. Usually 5 to 8,000-ish square foot is generally what I'd say is probably an average on that end, but all shapes and sizes, right? How many doctors do they have? Do they have goals to grow? Do they plan on staying just who they are? So different people have different goals with it.
If you have goals to grow, do you try to break that project into stages, or do you find it best to be for the practice owner to, if they envision a larger built up practice, do it all immediately versus break it up into a 2 or 3 stage type of project?
Yeah. I mean, if you have the ability to do it all at once, that's going to be your most effective from a cost perspective, right? Because you're already initializing or activating certain subcontractors. So if they're on site, it's cheaper to keep them on site versus they go home and then we got to schedule them to come back again. So overall, but that's not always feasible, right? So we'll take that into mind, right? If there are plans for future growth or changes, then hopefully we've identified that early on in the process. We'll design the current project according to that with the idea that, hey, when it comes time to expand or add on, like we're not having to undo a bunch of work. Like we've planned for that. And now we're going to go ahead and initiate that plan to whatever growth strategy they. If you're talking about phasing, right? Like, that's a lot of existing practices that want to renovate, right? Typically involves some type of phasing, right? If they're not looking to move buildings. And that's something that we've grown accustomed to doing. It's not ideal. It elongates the process because they're working, we're working. We then have to move them to the new side, then they start, so then we have to marry the whole thing together. So not ideal, but it's also not ideal to shut down for 3-4 months. So we got to keep them open. We've done it before, and it's something that we're used to doing. So it's just kind of part of what we do.
You've done so many projects now. Are there common misconceptions that DVMs come to you with? That like, oh, I want to do this, or I'm going to try to do that. And you're like, no, I can't. That's not going to work.
I don't think we always tell them no. I think that probably the most, especially from the COVID days, right? Like just the cost of things changing a whole bunch, right? Now money's changing, the cost of money, right? So any preconceived notions about like the cost of construction, how far a certain amount of money will go, I think that's something that we have to talk about early on to make sure that everybody's expectations are in line. The other side of it is like being somebody who's specialized. And I think when people go to the website and see the pretty pictures, which we're very proud of those pretty pictures, but I think people associate the pretty pictures as like, oh, these guys are the most expensive. And that's not necessarily true. Like we pride ourselves on providing value, right? So when you're specialized, you go about things you don't know. I already talked about like the benefit of past successes and also failures, right? You learn what materials provide a value, durability wise, aesthetically, right? So you learn to use those, recommend those. Ultimately, somebody can say, hey, Ryan, like we want these restoration hardware lighting fixtures in the lobby and there's nothing you can do to stop us. Like, okay, we can do that, right? But there's certain ways of achieving certain things aesthetically, functionality, efficiency wise, that can be achieved other than just spending a lot of money. So, but either way, it's about making sure on the early part of the process that everybody's on the same page. I've had conversations where decent sized clinics think they're going to spend $300,000 to do a full renovation, and that's just not reality these days. So just making sure we're giving them information based on like, hey, these are real projects, similar projects, this is what they cost, and making sure we're all on the same page.
Is there even an ability to set an expectation around price with so much, especially today's climate, with so much going on, concerns on tariffs, concerns on pricings? Like, how do you manage the client expectations of here's budget, but we could be out of scope here pretty quickly?
Yeah, it's tough, right? But we can build pillows, contingencies, right? Prepare them. Certain things you just don't know, right? Like putting together a new build, right? Like from the dirt, you do some testing. Generally know what's happening there. And as long as you don't have anything like the tariffs are a bit of a wild card right now. But as far as the other things go, we lock in contracts on prices. So hopefully we can hold that. There's some additional variables when it comes to remodeling a current facility, because sometimes you open a wall and you just don't know what you don't know, right? Whether it's a surprise or just a project or some structural stuff that we didn't anticipate because I'm surprised you found behind the wall, right? So those things, but generally speaking, again, that's where experience comes into play, right? Usually some of those surprises have come up in the past. So we try to make sure that we're accounting for some of those.
Is there a timeline for all this? Like ground up, is there from design to doors opening? Is there an average length of time that the practice owner could be, within 8 months, within 12 months, we are operational, or is it just so dependent upon it? So many different variables.
That's a great question. All of the answers are yes, right? Like, so there are variables, right? Ground up construction. Is it a pad ready site? Meaning, are there utilities and things right there? So basically like we just have to smooth some dirt out and start going. Or do we got to move dirt? We got to bring dirt in here. Was there an oil tank underneath there? Because it was an old gas station at some point that we have to then mediate. So there's all kinds of questions that hopefully we help answer throughout the process. And then we can hone in a more dialed in schedule for them. But typically, if we're really talking, we can give generalities, just like we can give generalities on cost per square foot based on historical figures. And ultimately, until we go through a process, we really got to dial that in as we go through there and understand kind of what their specific project is.
I like how Jared also like the money questions. And now I'm like, hey, so I love that you're Fair Free certified. Thank you for that. I think that's huge. What inspired you to do that? And how do you use that, in helping design these practices?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when that came about years ago, it's something that got popular really quick. It's important to folks. And as we are committed to the veterinary and animal health community, it's important to us, right? So if that's a goal for people, it's important for people. It's important for our industry. Like, I talk about the industry and how quickly it is transformed. Like, again, I talked about how I worked in a veterinary clinic when I was younger. What veterinary clinics look like these days compared to 20 years ago, right? What humane societies look like today compared to 20 years ago, like so vastly different, right? How people practice medicine, the tools that are in veterinary clinics, all this stuff is so different, right? So as we continue to change, whether it's the design of the practice, is that built around new philosophies like fear-free, like we need to be educated on that just as much as we need to be educated on, hey, what is the electrical source required for an MRI machine? You want 2 dental machines? Like, all these different things that go into planning for a veterinary community. Like, we don't ever want to get into a situation where a veterinarian is in a facility that we help design and build, and they come to us later and say, why didn't you tell us about this? Right? Like, why wasn't this part of your process? Right? You guys are the experts. So it's a responsibility that we take on to make sure that we're looking into these things. Again, whether it's philosophies on how we're working with patients and how the facility can be designed around that, or like making sure we're adapting for new technologies. Diagnostic equipment is shrinking, right? So we need to make sure we're adapting our diagnostic areas if they're going to have in-house lab. Instrument processing areas are becoming more defined. They used to just throw an autoclave in the corner. That's your instrument processing area, right? Like, no, now we're walking into veterinary clinics where it's more like a human dental facility. You have a process, right? Dirty, clean, there's stages to it, right? So we need to make sure that when we're designing that, like, we take responsibility for that expertise so that they can make that decision on, if that's important to them.
We get past the design, we are deep into the build. My assumption is you are operating like the quarterback, right? Are you making sure plumbing, HVAC, all of the trades are coming together? That is not on the practice owner. They are, I'm assuming, hands off and just getting weekly updates from you and your team on kind of status, where are we at, where's things going?
Yeah, I would say different people do that different ways, and certain clients like to be more involved, certain clients like to be less involved. But from our perspective, we do kind of a team approach with how we manage it. There's different layers. We have an on-site superintendent that is on site. They are managing the subcontractors, making sure they're showing up on time. The quality of work is good. We're meeting the schedules. And then you also have an independent project manager, also an RWE employee, who's working with that super, managing the budget, working with them on the schedule. And then every week we're doing what we call an OAC meeting with the client, meaning that owner, architect, contractor, design, contractor, owner, all meeting together, updates on the status of the project, any questions that they have, any new developments that we need to deliver to them. So we're constantly in communication and managing that project.
Very good. Well, I want to be mindful of your time here. I appreciate everything you've given us thus far. I say, is there anything that you're most excited about in the design build in the coming 12 months, 24 months?
I think I kind of touched on it. Like, again, just coming from Midmark, an equipment manufacturer that encompasses a broad range of equipment that goes into a veterinary facility, to being on this side of the project from RWE. It's just such a cool thing to see how the industry has changed. Like, whether you're going to conferences, meeting people who have carved out like niches as specialists, as Megan and Jared, you have vet partners, right? Like a cool expanding group. Like, it's just cool to see the industry, whether it's purely focused on the design of facilities and how that's changed, or just our industry in general, the different businesses, whether like accounting isn't a new business, but you guys are now specialists in the animal health world, right?
Sure.
That's awesome, right? And how that kind of trickles down to some of these different consultants, advertising folks, commercial real estate folks who have also found their way to this industry. And it's just such a good place, because I feel like, for whatever reason, like the animal health world it's a huge world, but it feels like a small family. I know that sounds super corny. Well,
We all understand it, yeah.
Go to all these conventions and you just see the same people. Everybody's so happy to see each other. It's like a reunion every time you go to a convention. So it's exciting to see the industry progress like it has.
Sure.
So aside from conventions, where can people find you?
You can find me on our website. There's literally a little picture of me that you can set a meeting with.
Is the
RWE
mustache there on the
Design-
picture, or no mustache?
It's been removed. So
Gotcha. All right.
be
They might not
removed
recognize you, so
shortly after, right?
All right.
Generally speaking, you'll recognize me. The name's Ryan Whitley. It'll say "Talk to an expert."
Gotcha.
You can set some time that way. RWE Design Build.com. We're at most of the cool conferences, veterinary specific, and if you need to have a conversation, feel free to reach out. Happy to talk to anybody.